What's up, Internet? This is Rambling Josh, and today I wanted to talk about skill trees. So, skill trees to me is a mechanic that has always been really enticing. I see a game has skill trees and it's instantly more interesting to me. It's something that actually sells games to me. But the reason I'm talking about it today is because I see a lot of games in more modern times, especially AAA games and what have you, that they kind of take the ideas of a skill tree and they do almost a bad job of it. It's it looks like a skill tree, it has a lot of the characteristics of a skill tree, but it doesn't really capture the essence of what a skill tree actually is, what it accomplishes for a game, at least to me. So I figured that I would take a little bit of time today to talk about what that actually is, and I'm going to use a couple of specific examples, namely Path of Exile and Assassin's Creed Origins, both of which are games that I'm actually am playing currently, not this exact moment obviously, but have played within the last few days. So a skill tree to me is essentially a mechanic that exists in some games that's usually a kind of a progression mechanic in which the player is given choices as far as what they want to learn, what path they want to go down, so on and so forth. And because it's like a tree, it's usually, you have to make investments into a certain path or route or whatever in order to unlock the higher tier stuff, so that it's you're not just cherry picking all the best abilities and that kind of thing, but rather in order to get there you have to find your path, you have to pick a route. And essentially the entire purpose of this is that it gives the player agency over their own progression, or in a lot of cases their own character. And basically what that means is that you're kind of taking a system that is inherently very broad, and you're choosing the way that you want to engage it as a player. And obviously this can look like a lot of different things in different games. I mentioned Path of Exile, and the tree in that game is enormous. If Google is to be trusted, it is a total of 1,325 passes on their passive skills tree. And I think the player can choose something like 124 of those at most. That's a good deal under 10%. So there's this entire massive tree, and most of it one singular character is never going to see. You have the ability to hit any node as any class, but you have to be very picky about what you go for and what you don't. And potentially the biggest thing about this passive skill tree in Path of Exile that really gets me is the fact that all of them are passive abilities. Typically when you think of skill trees, a lot of times one of the criticisms that a lot of them will have is that everything is a boring passive ability. And in World of Warcraft they did away with their skill trees, and a big part of the reason because a lot of talents on their trees were just 1% damage increases kind of thing. And that on its own is not especially interesting. But you look at something like Passive Exile, you have all of these interesting ways to develop a character so that you have exactly the niche character that you want to build. And one of the things that I've realized about myself over the years is that that's exactly what draws me in. I like the idea of developing a plan and then over the course of a game seeing that plan kind of come to fruition. I've actually tried playing Path of Exile a few times over the years and never really pulled me in. The gameplay is not super amazing in that game, so I never really tried for very long. But this time what the difference was is I found a skill very early on that appealed to me. Specifically Molten Strike. Basically it's you hit a dude and these balls of lava or whatever burst out of him, and they do this AoE attack out of him. And so I was oh hey, this is cool. And I decided, I'm gonna build a character around this. I'm gonna be a tanky guy who does lots of fire damage, and and all this kind of stuff. And so because of the fluid nature that this game has, because of the proper implementation of skill trees, I can say, oh, like I want elemental damage, I want fire damage, I want life regen, I want health, I want fire resistance, I want, all this stuff. And there's all this stuff I don't want. And the further I get in the game, I can, adjust as I go. So I could make a plan from day 1, and if I decide on day 3 that, this plan is not working out as well as I thought, or like, hey, actually I need a little bit more defense than I thought, or what have you, then I can adjust, I can take a different path, and it's all just great. I'm the master of my own destiny. My character gets to be exactly what I want it to be. I can be as creative or as vanilla as I want in what he does. It's exactly what a skill tree system should be. Obviously, skill trees don't have to be as, big and complex and convoluted as Path of Exile. That's actually one of my biggest criticisms of the game, is that every system in that game is complicated and hard to wrap your head around for a beginner and all this kind of stuff. But that's kind of that's the point of how these work, right? Is it gives you the agency, it lets you be creative, it lets you play the game the way you want to play it. So now, in contrast, the other game that I want to look at is Assassin's Creed Origins, like I said. And this very much falls into the trap of kind of like the AAA, like, it's a skill tree, but only kind of, and whatever. And the reason it doesn't really perform the same way, at least to my mind, is because basically it doesn't do any of the stuff that I just talked about. Don't get me wrong, I like Assassin's Creed Origins. I've been excited about it for a very long time. Technically longer than it's even officially being announced. But I didn't even know that this game had a skill system until a few days before it came out. I was looking at pictures of the game just by chance. I think I saw a picture on Twitter or something, and it was like some media site that was like, oh, this is the best skills to take for Assassin's Creed Origins. So I was like, oh, there's a skill tree in this game. That's cool. And immediately my mind goes to, okay, well, what kind of character do I want to play in this game? I know that it's like based in Egypt, they've got this new combat system and all this kind of stuff, so I'm like, okay, I guess I should focus on melee combat to try and take advantage of this new combat system that they're focusing on so much. And I know they have these cool, like, Khopesh swords that are, like, Egyptian-style swords. I really like Khopeshes. They're cool. So maybe I'll make an assassin guy who's, like, super focused on using Khopeshes and all this stuff. And then I get the game, and I look at the skill trees, and not only can I not do any of that, it's just another kind of, like, throwaway skill system. I shouldn't say it's throwaway. It's still a system that has merits, but I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. So the thing that these kind of trees typically do is, for one, they don't give you a lot of flexibility. They don't change the way that you play the character necessarily. Typically what they do is they actually function more as like a choose-your-own unlock kind of thing. So basically, rather than tying all of the unlocks for your character to story events, it's basically, it gives the player the ability to choose what upgrades they want right now and what ones they want later. Because eventually you're going to be able to get all of them, so it's not like you're making a real choice. It's more an order of operations thing. Which, like I said, it does have its own merits, because I think that you're more engaged in the thing that you're unlocking when you're making the choice, rather than the story throwing it at you and being like, hey, you have this now. Do it what you will with it, or don't, whatever. But in the end of the day, my Bayek doesn't look any different from someone else's Bayek at the end of the game. I shouldn't say that either, actually. There is a little bit of merit to the skill trees in Assassin's Creed Origins, because what they did do is each of the 3 trees has an ultimate ability, which you can invest multiple points into. You can put as many points in as you want, and it gives you a 1% damage increase to kind of the thing from that tree. So melee attacks, bows, or tools. So you do have the ability to say, like, oh, well, I do 15% increased melee damage, and that's my specialization. Now, I mean, that's a pretty boring ultimate talent in your melee talent tree, but at least it does give you some ability to actually specialize on something, to be something specific, to kind of dedicate yourself to a specific thing. And I can kind of get why, especially a AAA studio like Ubisoft would not want you to do that, because they have all these systems, they have all these tools that they spend a lot of time developing and building the game around and making it so that people can use these things, so they don't want you to ignore that those things exist. Because that's kind of what tends to happen when you specialize, is the more you focus on one thing, the less you can focus on everything else, right? So they don't want you to be like, I'm gonna kill everything with swords, and I'm gonna stop assassinating and XYZ, because I spent all these talent points into swords, and I don't have any talent points spent in assassinating, so I'm not very good at assassinating, but I'm really good at swords. Well, this is Assassin's Creed, so you're gonna have to still do some assassinating. But anyways, that's the comparison that I want to make. I feel like I really kind of flew through my points on this one. I don't know, I'm feeling especially animated today. I guess I just really care about this topic. But yeah, skill trees. I really like them. I love choosing how I play my character. I love making hybrid characters that do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. All this crazy awesome stuff that skill trees empower you to do. That's why some of my favorite games are like Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy Tactics, all this kind of stuff. Stuff where you can build unique characters that are what you want them to be. And like I said, there is definitely merits to the way that these other modern games are doing skill trees, but they're really not even the same thing. It's basically like an entirely different beast altogether, which is fine, but I'd really prefer to see a lot more of my kind of skill tree. But anyways, thanks for watching. I'll see you later.